Yeah, as Clint said, last week we started a series called Attraction, Sex, and War, all focused on relationships. And last week, Clint jumped in with the analogy that marriage is the destination, right? So marriage is the kind of the end cap, maybe, of the goal, right? Now, some of us, not all of us in this room will get married, but most people, the overwhelming majority of people, are likely to get married. And so over the next, 35-ish minutes, I'm going to unpack, hopefully, what happens from the singleness season and piece of life, hopefully all the way to the marriage piece. Now, last week, if you're here, Clint mentioned some of the trips that he and his wife, Brooke, have been on. Now, they've been to Ireland. They've been to plenty of, I think they talked about a Jackson Hole trip that he went to. Man, before I came on the team at Foundation, I really struggled with learning how to take a vacation. Those of you that know me well know that I don't take a lot of time off, and when I take time off, I'm usually taking time off to do something else. So I'm staying busy constantly all the time. And so part of the pieces for me to be on the team at Foundation was for my family to learn how to take vacations. And we have learned over the last couple years, in 2019 and 2020, we have taken some really awesome vacations. Now, the first one in 2019, my wife Erin and I, from our 15th anniversary, we went to Boston. I love history. I love baseball. And Erin just kind of came, I guess, along for the ride. I got to choose where we went. And we stepped into Fenway Park. It was incredible. And it's like we went back to the 1960s. It was just perfect. It was a perfect evening for baseball. And that's one of my favorite memories of any of the vacations that I've ever taken. Like, we stepped into that stadium, and it was like a time warp. We went from 2019 to 1956 or something like that. It was incredible. And then last year, pre-COVID, my family and I, we had the opportunity to go to Williamsburg, Virginia, to Yorktown, Virginia, and to Washington, D.C. And it was an incredible trip. And last week, Clint mentioned how much that he and Brooke put effort into planning their family trips, the money that is saved, the details that are looked at. And those trips, as he shared with me, have been incredible for their family. Now, today, I share with you the trips that I've been on because there are people in this room that would say, man, Boston's cool, but Ireland's better, right? Most of you would probably say that. Or you would say that D.C. is awesome, but man, going out west, going to California or going to something, you're going to compare what you've done with what I've done. And what I'm going to tell you is this. It's real simple. And I want to use this quote to preface our entire talk today. A pastor by the name of Craig Groeschel said this a few years ago, and it has stuck with me, and it's going to be on the screen. He said, the quickest way to kill something special is to compare it to something else. So the quickest way to kill the special in my vacation is to compare it to somebody else's trip. The quickest way to kill the special in my marriage is to compare my marriage to another one. The quickest way to kill the special in my time of singleness is to compare it to somebody else's time of singleness or dating. Right? The quickest way to kill something special that God has wired in you is to compare it to something else. And I sit in this quote quite frequently. I think about it probably once a week because it's really easy to compare yourself to somebody else. You don't even know that you're doing it half the time, but it's really easy to compare yourself to others. Now, when we talk about marriage as the destination today, or the destination of what our relationships, kind of the end point or the cap of our relationships, and I'm going to argue later that marriage is not necessarily that end piece, okay? But the vehicle that we take to get from where we are now to where we want to be for most of us is probably marriage, right? So that vehicle that we take starts in a season of singleness and then develops in a season of dating that eventually leads to courtship, engagement, and marriage. You guys know what I'm talking about. But that vehicle, right, that's going to get us, that car that's going to get us from point A to point B is what we're going to look at this morning. But the quickest way for you to short circuit or run that car into the ground is to compare that car to another car that's on the same road as you. My kids do this all the time. Like my middle son, Caleb, is obsessed with Teslas right now, and he's comparing my Honda Accord to a Tesla. Okay? That's where I'm at when I'm talking about comparison, but that's the vehicle thing that we're going to today. So I got a couple of statistics for you that are focused. The first few are focused on singleness, and the next couple are focused on dating. I just want you to listen to these. They'll be on the screen, and let them sink in. Think about the people that you know. Think about your situation. Think about just kind of the community that might be specific to some of these things for you. Half of singles, this is from a Pew Research study, it says half of singles say they're not currently looking for a relationship or dates, right? That seems kind of high to me. I don't know. I have plenty of years of experience as a college pastor, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But while a quarter of the people say they are looking for either a committed romantic relationship or casual dating. Now, the next statistic jumped out to me. It says 61% of single men say that they are currently looking for a relationship or dates, compared to 38% of single women. That's a big disparity. It's a huge disparity. And they surveyed people from their early 20s all the way up to like early 60s. So this is a broad range, and there's a lot of people that they surveyed. Now we're going to shift gears to dating. Like, if you're a parent in the room, doesn't matter how old your kids are, I want you to think about this. The American Academy of Pediatrics notes that on average, okay, so here's how average works if you don't know. There's people that are above the average and below the average, and then they get an average, right? That's a very in-depth math lesson. The American Academy of Pediatrics notes that on average, girls begin dating at 12 and a half years old, and boys a year later. 12 and a half years old, okay? For frame of reference, my second grade daughter, Emmy, is 8 years old, right? So in 4 years and some change, she is supposedly going to start dating if she's average, right? I don't want my daughter to be average. She's going to be above average, so she's going to be at 24 before she starts dating, and then that's how we're going to go with it. The next one is about the later end of the dating spectrum. The average woman, listen to this, finds her life partner somewhere around the age of 25, while for men, they're more likely to find their soulmate at 28, with half of the people finding their one in their 20s. Now, I say all that to say that the stuff that we're talking about this morning is clearly important. The vehicle of dating that gets us to the destination of marriage is incredibly critical. It's incredibly critical. And it's incredibly critical for everybody in the room, whether you're single or you're dating or you're single again or you're working towards marriage, or maybe you have kids and you're divorced and you're older. And you're going to be preparing your kids to jump in this vehicle. You're going to jump in this car, hopefully to jump in this Tesla and ride towards marriage. You are preparing for one of these phases right now. I promise you, you're doing it. So don't zone me out when we talk about these things. Now, there's some of you in this room that are single and you're struggling to work through it. Some of you are single because of a divorce that you didn't want. Some of you are single because you have not found the right person to marry yet. Some of you are single because of mistakes on your end. Some of you are struggling to find the purpose that God has for you in your singleness. Some of you are in a dating relationship that are struggling to make things work. Some of you are in a dating relationship that is thriving, and you're the example for others around you. I know all of these things because, like I said, I dealt with it with college students for 12 years. I've been in the thick of this attraction, sex, and war piece for my entire time in ministry. I've dealt with the young end of the spectrum, working with middle school and high school students, and I've dealt with it in marriage counseling on the older end of the spectrum. The common denominator is that we all struggle with this to some degree. So if you think about dating as the vehicle that gets us to the destination of marriage, why in the world does it start at 12 and a half years old? Why does it start that young? I'll tell you why. Think back to your middle school years. What in the world were you doing in middle school? I don't know if we have any middle school students in here, but man, I remember in seventh grade walking into one dance with one girl, holding her hand, and my aunt is here right now, and she was volunteering at something at this dance, and I remember walking in with one girl and 30 minutes walking out holding hands with another girl. That is like the quintessential picture of middle school dating. And I walked past where she was volunteering, and she was like, that's a different girl. And it's only been like 30 minutes. I was like, yeah, I work fast, I guess. But the value of dating at a young age is extremely critical. Think about it. In middle school, you're starting to learn what you're attracted to. You're starting to learn the pieces of what a person that you might be interested in kind of looks like. Same thing is happening in high school. You're starting to learn that. You're becoming self-aware and self-conscious of what's going on, not only in your body, but in your mind and in your heart. So you're wrestling with this in the early half, the 12 and a half, 13 and a half years old. You're starting to wrestle with this, and you need guidance. If we think about the car analogy again, dating in middle school and high school and even in early college has extreme value. But to carry the analogy a little bit further, like when you're learning how to drive a car, you have a trusted adult around you that's helping you learn how to drive before you take the keys and do it on your own. That's the same place that we are with our dating relationships, even at a young age. Okay, so fast forward a little bit to college. Now, this, for the parents in the room, should start to scare you quite a bit. Maybe it's not scary. Maybe it just motivates you to start now in building healthy relationships and patterns for your kids. But I would argue from my experience as a college pastor that the transition from dating as a teenager for all of those things that I just mentioned to dating as a young adult for the express purpose of marriage, there is a light switch that flips somewhere in college where you start to discover, I'm not just dating for me, and I need to think about the other person that's connected to this relationship. Now, who helps their kids flip that light switch? Should it be their student pastor or their college pastor? Maybe. But that starts often with their parents. And I got a lot of kids in our college ministry, and the way that it happened was there were some of them that, like, you could tell had this conversation with their parents, and they knew that they were kind of headed towards a new phase in relationships. And so they kind of were equipped to be able to flip the switch to realize that all the ways they used to date in middle school and high school were okay, but there's a new purpose that we're going to date towards marriage, and like those Christian kids that came to me. And then there was others, that 18, 19, 20-year-old guys that were just scoping and hoping. Like they were literally walking on campus, and if like I would watch them and like take their faces like and just bring it back to where I was talking to them at the lunch table, right? It was just, they were looking at any girl that walked past. Like, guys, stop. That's not why we do this, okay? So you guys as parents, as a part of a larger community, as a church, are in charge of helping flip the light switch. Maybe I can make a sense of it a little bit more with this phrase. Here it is. Purpose drives behavior. Our purpose in life drives the behavior that we attach to where we're headed. So the easiest way for me to explain this right now is that my 11-year-old son, Caleb, wants to be a major league ball player. He wakes up every day, and the way that he does everything, he just wants to be Dansby Swanson, right? Like his hair, the way he approaches his day, the clothes that he wears, he wants to be Dansby Swanson. But over the last 2 or 3 seasons, I've said, hey, Caleb, look, your purpose right now is to not be Dansby Swanson or be that dream, right? Your purpose is not to get to that dream. Your purpose, and this is what we're going to tag your behavior towards, your purpose is to be the best teammate that you can be for your coaches and your teammates, so that they know that they can trust you and that you're going to be all in, and you got to bring your A game to every practice and every game if you want to get to your dream. Same thing in our relationships. Our purpose drives our behavior. And it's finally starting to sink in with him, and I think this season might be just that season. He's not going to, be drafted or anything. He's 11. But I think he's getting there. I have 3 questions for us today as we navigate what this looks like. The first one is this: what is the purpose of my singleness? If you're single today, I want you to really think about what, as we work through Scripture, I want you to think about what your purpose is. The second thing is, I want you to consider, if you're dating or jumping back into the dating game or desiring to jump back into the dating game, what is the purpose of your dating? And the third question, I'm going to hold that and we'll get to that later. And like I said, in my days as a college pastor, you can imagine the spectrum of students that I dealt with. The first guy that I ever discipled in our college ministry, I barely knew what discipleship was. I was 22 and I had never really worked one-on-one with anybody. And this kid, he walked into my office, he was maybe 20. So I was like, so much wiser than him. And so he, honestly, he sat in my office and he said, "Hey, Jason, I think God is calling me to be single." I was like, man, what? I've never had this conversation with anybody before. I didn't even know it was an option. And so as Adam sits across from me and we're having this conversation, he's like, "What do you think about 1 Corinthians chapter 7? I'm like, man, I don't know. What do you think about it? I had no idea. So we opened up the Bible and we read together. And Paul, the church planter that we talk about frequently, Paul is writing to a church that he planted in the city of Corinth. And this church had asked him a bunch of questions. And this is the part of the letter where Paul gets to answering the questions that they asked. And to just preface the first part of this, Paul, they're asking him basically, is it better to marry or to be single? Is it better to get married or to fulfill this single life purpose? And Paul starts out his answer by saying that it's better for men not to marry, but better for them to marry so that they don't burn with passion that can lead to sin. In an effort to keep people from sin, he tells them to marry. He also tells the husband and the wife that their bodies are not their own, that their bodies belong to their spouse. The language that he uses here is kind of like the meaning behind the word yield. He says then that not deprive each other sexually unless it is for an agreed upon time of prayer. And then Paul clarifies, though, saying that this is not a commandment from God. This is wisdom that he's learned along the journey. And then Paul closes up this first section by saying, essentially, that singleness is a gift. And that's the gift that God has chosen for me. But others have other gifts. So you're probably, if you were with us last week, thinking, okay, well, Clint talked about marriage. Is Paul being contradictory to what God started in the Garden of Eden? Is Paul contradicting marriage? He isn't. But we're going to look at 1 Corinthians 7, verse 8, to see what he actually said. Now to the unmarried and to the widows, I say, it is good for them to stay unmarried as I do. Verse 9. But if they cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. Here's why I know that Paul is not contradicting what we said last week. The first thing is because he is celebrating, if you read the passage, if you read the entire chapter, he is celebrating the people he's commending the people who have answered God's call to stay single. And he's not contradicting his own words. We used Paul's words last week to talk about marriage. Paul had a great grasp of what marriage was supposed to look like and to be. He is not contradicting himself at all. And here's why I know this. We're going to jump down to verse 32 and we're going to read from there. He said, I would like for you to be free from concern. An unmarried man is concerned about the Lord's affairs and how he can please the Lord, verse 33. But a married man is concerned about the affairs of this world and how he can please his wife, and his interests are divided. And every time I read this scripture, it jumps me back in to my office with my friend Adam. And I watched him live that out. He was completely unencumbered by just the affairs of life. He was chasing after Jesus. He was 100% chasing after Jesus. He was doing exactly what Paul is talking about here. Paul is focused on the concept of being devoted. If you took the entirety of Paul's writings, this is one of his major themes for the churches he's planting. He's saying Jesus followers are to be devoted to what Jesus teaches. Jesus followers are to be devoted to what the church teaches. And the point that he's clearly making is that those who are single have the ability to zero in on pursuing Jesus first. Verse 35, I think is incredible. He says, I am saying this for your own good, not to restrict you, but so that you might live in a way in undivided attention to the Lord. Now, in full transparency, I have not had, I've been married 16 years. Aaron and I have been together almost 21 years. So this period of singleness is something that I've not had for 21 years. So I reached out to some friends of mine who are a part of my college ministry and some other people that I've met along the way, like Clint mentioned last week, reaching out to wives that he really respected. And I've reached out to some single folks, and I think they have some incredible wisdom, and I'm just going to read them because I think this will help it connect the dots. There's 10 things from 4 people, and I'm just going to read them rapid fire. If you're single in the room, zone in. Listen. Be secure in yourself first. Because getting in a relationship, sometimes you can lose yourself because you desperately want to make the other person happy, and you wind up not making yourself happy in the process. I found myself wanting to be a good person for the person that I was with, but I didn't think that I was a good person in the first place. So since I was not comfortable with myself and insecure with myself, the relationship that I had didn't work out. Don't let bitterness of not having what you want hinder you from celebrating those in your community who are getting what you want. For example, getting married or having a baby, etc. Trusting God with your singleness doesn't mean trusting God that your singleness is temporary, because it could be long term. Set, communicate, and be actively prepared to honor boundaries, both physical and emotional, with people you're in a relationship with. This is a good one. Waiting time is not wasted time. Marriage is a holiness factory, not a happiness factory, and the same applies to dating. If you live to love the other, you will have both holiness and happiness. If you use the other to try to be happy for you, you will have neither. Last couple. Learn to be resilient. Work through the pain and allow God to help you work through it. Face the difficulty in your season of singleness head on. The last one. Be careful not to entangle your spiritual lives too intimately before you get married. If you entangle your spiritual life too intimately before you get married, you'll lower your other guards in other areas, emotionally and intellectually. And this one's one that I just had to put on the screen for everybody. Singleness is not a punishment or lesser status. Just as marriage is a gift, singleness is a gift. And when we talk about gifts, gifts are incredible because we can use the gifts. I don't know anybody that has ever gotten a gift for Christmas and just set it on a shelf and looked at it until the next Christmas. We unwrap the gift, we open the box and use what it is. Even if we don't like it, we re-gift it and give it to somebody else. We utilize the gift. So don't miss out. Don't miss out on the benefits of the now, wishing for what is next. I'm going to say that again. Don't miss the benefits of the now, wishing for what is next. If being single on occasion leads us to dating, then what is question number 2? What in the world is dating for? What do we do it? Why do we do it? For most of us in the room today, dating is currently the vehicle, like I said, that we take to get to the destination of marriage. The difficult thing about dating is in the Bible, there's no references to dating at all. It's all arranged marriages. If you go back and look to the Old Testament, the New Testament, the ancient Near Eastern culture, there's some Eastern cultures that still do this. So dating is completely foreign in Scripture times. So there's nothing there. So if you looked in the back of your Bible to the concordance and you looked up dating, you're not going to find anything specific on dating. But what I will tell you is in betrothal times and in arranged marriages, those folks that were arranged to get married, probably from a young age, they learned to love each other. And some of them learned to love each other to the point where they made their relationships work. I have some kids that I'm willing to do arranged marriages with. If you guys want to take any of them, they're decent kids so far. I'd rather them go through the arranged marriage piece than struggle through dating. So if you want them, we can talk after. But there's no dating in the Bible. But there is a lot of wisdom in the Bible that we can take about relationships. There's a ton of wisdom that we can take, and remember what I said earlier, purpose drives behavior. And I get that we learn about ourselves and the people that we pursue when we're dating, but the more we do it the wrong way, the more the enemy sneaks in and just twists all that we believe about dating. I've seen it. I've watched it. I have seen dating completely tear apart young adults. Completely. It's real. The way that we do dating now for some people is that we download an app or a series of apps or a bunch of apps and we swipe right. If we like the person, I think that's what you do. You swipe right and then you just got this profile and then you start dating and then it just, a lot of times it can blow up. We're not prepared for dating anymore. So if you're parents in the room, it is your job to teach your kids how to do this the right way. You know, we swipe right, and then we hook up, and then we realize we've made mistakes, and then we start over. And we get so into this cycle that, you know, we just lose ourselves. We lose who God has designed us to be. We lose the heart of who we are. And I know plenty of people, I've officiated ceremonies for people who have met via apps or online. But they did the hard work to get to the goal. So I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I think that it's a very viable way in today's culture to meet people. But we cannot waste any time. But the cool part about God, one of the many incredible things about God is that even if you are in a relationship right now that is not healthy, you can start today, right now, today, to make that dating relationship healthy and growing and pushing towards the end destination of marriage. One of our values here at Foundation is on-purpose relationships. And if there's no understood purpose, remember purpose drives behavior. If there's no understood purpose of a relationship, then it's going to come off the tracks. If there's no understood purpose, our culture, Satan, somebody will put a purpose there. Trust me. For the 28-year-old in the room that's struggling with your dating relationships, let today be a reminder that purpose can be found again. Let today be a hopeful moment. And this on-purpose relationship is not just a spoken value here at Foundation. We mean it. Relationships are best meant to be lived out on purpose. Today is a gift. I want you to establish purpose or reestablish purpose in all the relationships that you have moving forward. Now, this brings me to the third question and probably most difficult question that we have today. Who in the world is all of this dating for? Who is the season of singleness for? What is all this complexity of relationships for and about? Now, naturally, at first glance, most of us would say that it's for us as individuals, that my season of singleness was for me, that my season in dating was for me, that my season of courtship and engagement and all of those things was for me. But I want you to listen to a passage in the same letter from the same writer to the same church that we read just a little bit ago, just a couple chapters later. 1 Corinthians 10:31 says this: "So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God." Now I know what you're thinking. Man, Jason, this is absurd. Our dating relationships are for God? Yep. Absolutely. Our training of our kids for these relationships is for God? Yep. Absolutely. 100%. This is all for God. Why should God be involved in this? That's a tougher question. I don't know about you, but if I'm trying to get to a destination, and I know it's going to be hard work to get there, I want as much help to get there as I can take. And I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt, that God is going to be the best resource, provider, comforter, counselor, everything for me to get to where I want to be. And if I can honor God in my dating and in my time of singleness, I can honor God in my marriage, then God is going to continue to work in me. And here's why this is important. I mentioned our healthy families value earlier. Here's why this is important. Imagine right now if you started today, what could you do to honor God? How much could you do to honor God in your relationships? If you're single right now, if you were fully devoted on what Jesus wanted you to do and you jumped into a dating relationship because it was the right time, then God's going to continue to take those habits that you learned while single and push them into dating. You're not just going to forget all that. It's going to be ingrained in who you are and who you've become. And you begin dating for the right reason. And then your marriage becomes eventually, maybe hopefully, your marriage becomes that marriage that everybody looks to. And earlier I said that maybe marriage is the destination, but what I really mean is a marriage that sets the example, that changes a family tree, that brings everybody else along with it, that becomes healthy. The changes that we can make in this moment, this may be a catalyst for change, that we take resources and learn and study and grow and be counseled and, seek wisdom. The things that we do now can set up our kids and our grandkids and our community and our church for health and flourishing down the road. This stuff matters. And it only works that way if we do it for God. Everything we do for God. Now, the elephant in the room is this. The elephant in the room is this. So if everything's for God, I'm just going to jump into it. Sex is for God too. Jesus, at the beginning, or kind of the beginning of his ministry in the book of Mark, he quotes an Old Testament passage that I think is incredible for him to quote. He's being tested on divorce, and people are trying to pick at him to get him to pick sides and all of those things. Jesus says this in Mark chapter 10, verses 6 through 9. But at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. Now you're thinking, Jason, that says nothing about sex. Well, it does. In the passage that we just read, it talks about leaving the father and mother and being united to his wife. If you go back to Genesis, where Jesus is quoting this from, you see in some older translations, you see the word cleave to his wife or to unite with his wife. And that literally means glue together. Glue together. We're becoming one flesh. Sex is created by God and glorifies God in the right context. So what's the Bible say about sex outside of marriage? And really, I'm going to do this really quickly. It splits it into two categories. The category of adultery, which is literally marriage outside, or sex outside of a marriage relationship. And then general sex, which is basically sex not connected to a marriage. And we can boil it down into two kind of categories. But there's tons of stories in Scripture, and I don't want to get into too much of that. But honestly, the way we do relationships on our journey, on the road, in our vehicle of singleness and dating and just all the other things that wraps around those relationships, honestly, it's no wonder why we've gotten to this point. We're just not doing it the right way. We're not doing our singleness for God. We're not living in our dating relationships for God. And we're certainly not living in, just our sex life for God. Now, in my college ministry days, we use this analogy quite a bit. And so this is some construction paper. This is about as arts and craftsy as I get. I had to ask Robin for supplies, and she was almost teaching me how to glue these pieces of paper together. Let's say this pink side is you, and the yellow side is somebody that you're in a relationship with, that you've glued yourself to, using the language of Genesis. And something goes wrong in your relationship and you end up, just single again. And you've given a bunch of yourself to that person. And eventually, you're kind of connected. And you can't really get your piece of paper off the other person without doing major damage. And there's evidence of this yellow paper all over the pink paper. Can't get it off. And so when we try to separate ourselves from each other, and that's why dating is so tough. That's why periods of singleness are so tough, because we're stuck to too many people, and we only get one sheet of paper. And so what I'm left with is this, and then I go take it and try to attach it to maybe a blue sheet of paper. And then eventually I realize that blue sheet of paper is not the right piece of paper for me, and so I just try to separate again. And then eventually I've got little yellow pieces of me all over the place. All over the place. I know that might be a silly illustration. But eventually, you leave more of yourself on other people than you really want to. I know this has been a lot this morning. I know that some of you have been tracking with me. I know that some of you have already zoned me out. I know our online crowd is probably thinking, man, what is he talking about? But here's what it comes down to. God has wired you, each of you, regardless of age, regardless of gender, regardless of anything that could separate us, God has wired you for relationship. And relationships are complex, but I want you to hear my heart when I say this. God has designed us each in a way that craves people to be a part of our lives. And I know each stage and phase of relationships brings with it its own hurdles and setbacks. But those of you who are single right now, if you're online or in the room with us, and you're desiring a relationship, but it's just not there yet, I want to promise you that God hears you. That God hears you. He sees your heart. He knows what you're going through. Those of you who are in a dating relationship that's not healthy and needs to make some changes, God hears you too. He sees your heart. He knows what you need. Those of you who are trying to feverishly prepare your kids for a dating relationship with you, man, I am right there. God hears you. Those of you who are married and growing and starting to set the example for other people, God hears you and will be right there with you. Those of you that are single and fulfilling the purpose that God has for you and you're tracking towards fully devoted life to Jesus, God hears you. God knows your heart, and he wants to be the king of it. Even if you don't believe it, he wants to talk to you. Psalm 139, 23 and 24 says this: "Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me to the way of everlasting." I don't know about you, but I need God to search my heart, to make sure that I don't have any impure motives on the inside so that I can embrace relationships. I can embrace friendships. I can embrace my marriage. I can embrace being a father to my 3 kids, pushing them towards this direction. I need God to hear me. And he's right there, ready to listen.